to talk about a dissociative surf experience and some takeaways about one of my early journeys in surfing. It was 5 o'clock by the time I finished at the car dealership. I waited more than 3 hours and basically was told they couldn't fix my problem. At that time in Hawaii, though, trying to drive from Kaka'ako to Ewa Beach is a nightmarish bumper-to-bumper parking lot. So I decided to check out a new spot for surfing. Thankfully, I'd brought my new mid-length with me. The sun was hanging low on the horizon when I arrived at Kaka'ako Beach Park, looking for a break called Flies that a coworker had told me about. I found the spot, but it was pretty lame for actual waves. Instead, I carried my board and flip-flopped my way down to the end of the waterfront, right on the edge of Kewalos Harbor, where there were stone steps down into the water, a few rocks at the base, and then basically open ocean deep enough for berthing of relatively large ships. I would need to cross a danger zone ship passway to get to a break on the other side of it that I could see was at least sending waves, and there were a few people out there surfing. Yeah, this was a very strange experience. If you've been to Kaka'ako Beach Park and you've been down there, you'll recognize this location as right on the edge of a place called Point Panic. So I stood on the edge of the water for probably 5 to 10 minutes before I actually got the courage to get into the water. I was back and forth and I was like, maybe. And even then it was only a partial courage. I had to jump out from the stone steps to get over a rock and try to land safely in the water without hitting my board. I didn't hurt myself, but I did bonk the back end of the board on the stone step because I didn't jump out far enough. Not an illustrious start. I paddled out across to the actual break, which was rather stressful. My board was fine, but the wind was up and the waves were super choppy, and the surrealism began to set in. Low light, sun burning through a haze of gray clouds, wanting to rain but too lazy to do so. The chop of wave against my board threw spray in my face. The deep darkness of the waves and the sporadic movements of various currents pulling me in multiple directions all conspired to make this a "what the heck am I doing" kind of moment. Except that's not what I was thinking at the time. Once I was in the water, it was paddle to the break, read the waves. That was a wonky wave. Paddle some more. Catch a very strangely angled wave. Ride it too long down the face and lose most of my momentum before I stand. Bummer. Did I forget to mention this new board was a full 2 feet smaller than my previous board, and I was still getting used to it. But more on that in a minute. Now, I was in the lineup trying to read the waves and stay out of the way because I was relatively new and these folks looked like they knew what they were doing. I was no expert surfer, just a psycho who was apparently obsessed with the sport even though he knew nothing about it. I still know next to nothing about it, but it's only next to. I spent another 30 minutes or so paddling around, failing to catch waves, and getting confused by the various waves that were coming in and the various movements of the water. Finally, I was in the perfect spot, but I was facing the wrong way, as a clean wave was coming straight through. I flailed and probably looked ridiculous as I turned, but I was able to catch it at the last moment from the peak just as the whitewater crashed to my left. Now there I should have turned right, but my glance at the whitewater and another unknown force, which I'll talk about in a minute, made my pathway left inevitable. I stood on the board, got a very short ride in, tried to turn right down the wave, and the board basically just stalled right there, and the remainder of the wave passed beneath me as I fell over. I didn't think much of the stall, but now I really wanted another wave. The light was very low, visibility bad, and I had heard sharks like to hunt at dusk. Check. Near harbor mouths. Also check. I thought it best to get myself back into shore, back to the stone steps where I had already bashed my board once. Paddle, 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 and I was back. I had to time my exit to catch the railing on the stone steps because if the wave was receding, the moving water wouldn't let me move forward at all. I had to wait for a weak wave to splash me up against the steps and try not to smash my board or my face, catch the rail and pull myself up. I'm writing this so you know I was mostly successful. I did scuff up my board a bit on the lowest step, but otherwise I was able to harness a little tiny wave to push me right up to my feet and move out of the water. I recovered my flip-flops, which I had hidden in between some rocks near the steps. Then I went over to the point to spray the salt water off my board, and that's when I noticed I was missing one of the big fins on my quad fin setup. Quad fin is 4 fins, hence quad, and 2 larger fins, 2 smaller fins. One of the big ones, straight missing. Yeah, that bang on the rocks had taken my left side fin off entirely. No wonder that turning the board was a little bit squirrely. Never mind all that though. The weirdest thing about the whole event is the dreamlike, almost nightmarish quality that it holds in my memory. I wrote this only a few hours after it happened, and it felt like something that just wasn't real. I had only been surfing about 2 months at the time, 2.5 maybe, and I had some very close calls and a bunch of weird experiences, but there was nothing quite like this early, strange, dusk, new board wave thing that I did. I'm really glad that I went out, but it still feels like something very strange and uncanny. Reflecting on this story months later, I remain unable to draw too many conclusions or lessons from the event. When we think about the Christian walk, we're often entering places we don't quite understand. A spiritual war with forces and chaos swirling around us in ways that just are beyond us. Clarity is low, as a new believer especially. Skill is even lower. And going out alone is dangerous. Mostly, I am thankful that God protected me during this frankly foolish excursion. A few short weeks ago, there was a shark attack at the same break early in the morning, and that could easily have been me. The lesson here, I think, is that we ought not go too deep, too far, too fast into the dangers of the spiritual battle. Yet when we do in zeal, we can be thankful that the Lord is present for his people. He might have chastised me in many ways, but it is enough here that we remember that God is for us. The battle is real, yet still we need to keep going. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time. Soli Deo Gloria.